On November 28, 1981, the North Carolina Tar Heels started their 1981-82 season with a game against the Kansas Jayhawks in Charlotte. This game is notable primarily because it was the first college game of Michael Jordan's career. Well, it would be incorrect to say that Michael Jordan was a nobody. Actually, Jordan was recognized as having a lot of star potential before that November afternoon in Charlotte. As you probably already know, Michael Jordan was famously cut from the varsity basketball team at Laney High School during his sophomore year. Thanks to the efforts of Todd Sfair, Basketball Reference has a complete record of Jordan's high school games. As you can see here, while he was clearly a star player during his sophomore year, he wasn't necessarily dominant. It seems that the junior varsity team had a losing record. It wasn't really until Jordan's junior year that his legend started to grow. And even then, it took a bit of good luck for Jordan to draw the attention of Dean Smith and the University of North Carolina. Michael Jordan, The Life by Roland Lazenby is the best source out there for Jordan's pre-college years. And it's actually a pretty simple story. I mean, Jordan went to a UNC camp in the summer of 1980. He started to attract a lot of attention. And then Dean Smith got his commitment to play for UNC as soon as he possibly could. We can trace some of this in contemporary newspapers, but not all. Jordan's decision came at a press conference held in November 1980, for example. This article from the Chapel Hill News notes that Jordan's reputation had increased substantially during the summer of 1980. Michael Jordan turned down numerous other schools in favor of North Carolina, and according to Lazenby, was a little concerned that he might be forced to sit by Dean Smith, who was famously reluctant to play freshmen. And, well, the legend of Michael Jordan really started to grow from there. For example, Jordan managed 18 fourth-quarter points to help Laney High School win the Wilmington Star News Holiday Tournament on December 31, 1980. North Carolina newspapers suddenly exploded with articles about Jordan, who went from absolute obscurity to considerable local fame overnight. Jordan's biggest accolade of all came when he was named to the first team of Parade Magazine's High School All-American basketball team in March 1981. Before long, journalists were predicting that North Carolina would be better than ever in the 1981-82 season. Of course, North Carolina wasn't exactly an awful school. In fact, it had come very close to winning the national championship the year before. The previous season, Dean Smith's team lost the national championship game to Isaiah Thomas and the Indiana Hoosiers 63-50. In fact, the Tar Heels had not won a basketball national championship since 1957. That's when they beat Will Chamberlain and the Kansas Jayhawks by a single point in triple overtime, 54-53. In November 1981, there was a general feeling among college basketball fans that North Carolina was the team to beat. It had stars like Jimmy Black, Matt Doherty, Sam Perkins, and James Worthy. Now, you'll notice that Jordan wasn't part of that cover photo. In fact, before the first game, Jordan didn't even know if he was going to play that day, let alone start. One thing you won't see if you watch this game without any additional context is the hierarchy of the team. Jordan was a freshman and he was treated like one, regardless of how much natural athletic ability he had. Jordan was also hampered in the preseason by an ankle injury that kept him on the sidelines for a few weeks. Word had it that Jordan himself didn't know he was starting the first game until the very last minute. Now, if you only look at Wikipedia, you'll wonder if Kansas was much of an opponent at all for North Carolina. I mean, the team was filled with superstars. Kansas was unranked at the start of the season, and North Carolina was ranked number 1 in the preseason polls. Of course, the late Dean Smith would have told you that preseason rankings don't really matter that much. Kansas had lost a heartbreaker to Wichita State in the Elite Eight the year before, losing by a single point after giving up this late basket. Kansas, however, was without the services of Carl Henry. He was a 6'6" star who had transferred to Kansas from Oklahoma City, but did not receive permission to play until the next season. This is a story that is often overlooked. The other thing to keep in mind is that upsets were in the air. The day before this game, number 2 UCLA lost to BYU, and number 5 Georgetown, led by Patrick Ewing, lost to Southwestern Louisiana. In other words, this game was anything but a gimme. But before we jump into it, there's one more thing to talk about. Fans of LeBron James might wonder why Jordan played college ball at all. The truth is that the NBA technically could draft high school players in those days, though it chose not to. And the other thing to keep in mind is that college basketball was really becoming a huge sport at the same time that all of this was happening, and I mean late 1981. As crazy as it might sound, college basketball really was not a television sport until this famous UCLA-Houston game in 1968, and even then it was seen as sort of a novelty. In fact, it wasn't really until the famous Larry Bird-Magic Johnson matchup in the 1979 NCAA championship game that college basketball really started to establish itself as a major television sport. That was only 2 years before Jordan went to UNC. To my knowledge, Jordan's only TV time before this game had come when ABC's Wide World of Sports broadcast a few highlights from the McDonald's High School All-American game earlier in the summer of '81. And so when ESPN broadcast this Kansas-North Carolina game live, it really was Jordan's introduction to America. Now, the first thing you'll notice when you watch this is how different the game was. There was no three-point line and no shot clock. Kansas set up in a tight 2-1-2 zone, and North Carolina's shuffle offense was mostly focused on trying to get the ball to James Worthy or Sam Perkins underneath. Jordan's pass to Worthy here looks fine, but the ref ruled that the foul came before the shot and waved off the dunk. Yeah, the officiating in this game was pretty questionable. That's one of the things that people who criticize older basketball players and games tend to forget about. I mean, there were a lot of bizarre calls. Notice that Jordan passes up the shot here. That's something that seems kind of odd. He looked nervous taking his first shot, and the North Carolina offense looked frustrated against the zone. Kansas, meanwhile, built up an early 4-0 lead. Now this was Jordan's first made shot and the first points of the season for the Tar Heels. North Carolina tied the game a few minutes later. And on the heel of that, Jordan committed his first foul. Now, if you're a modern basketball fan, you might be kind of turned off by this game. I mean, there's a lot of strange stuff going on. For example, why wasn't this ruled out of bounds? James Worthy had a wide-open alley-oop opportunity here, but he chose to go for a layup instead of dunking it. I can't figure out why. Kansas took advantage of hesitant play by the Tar Heels, going up by 3 after this steal. And this one is bizarre. Worthy was called for traveling. Now, if you look at this in slow motion, you can clearly see that he did not travel. It's not even close. Lance Hill, who nobody remembers, hit this shot over Jordan to put Kansas up by 5. However, North Carolina came back. The good ball movement here helped North Carolina tie the game at 27. And that's when the highlights really start. Here's a baby hook by Sam Perkins. Tony Guy for Kansas had an impressive left-handed layup here. Worthy got a big block that turned into a transition layup for Jordan. And now we get our first sight of the confident Michael Jordan. Well, with James Worthy and Sam Perkins underneath, it seems that Dean Smith wanted Jordan to stick to an outside shooting role at the beginning. Again, that's kind of strange to think about when you look back on it, especially if you know what Jordan was capable of. But Michael Jordan was more than happy to play the role. The game was tied at 37 at the half, probably not what you'd expect from an unranked team playing the top team in the country. Kansas was shooting an incredible 60%, something that probably wasn't going to last. Jordan had 6 points, but 3 fouls. Notice that Worthy and Perkins were the team leaders at the half. Have you ever seen Jordan miss a dunk like this? But here's that beautiful outside jump shot. Sam Perkins benefited from a goaltending call here. I think it's close. What do you think? And North Carolina started a big run in the second half, throwing in some razzle-dazzle for good measure. Here's another strange call. I think they ruled that Perkins traveled when he tried to jump over a guy on the floor. And this is where Jordan's defense started to shine. Check out this pass to James Worthy. Kelly Knight for Kansas fouled out early. Note that Jordan is playing him straight up without fouling. And there's that outside shot again.
Jordan, the freshman, yes sir.
Now, the cool thing about watching these old games is seeing highlights from players that you've never heard of. Here's a great leaping leaner by Lance Hill for Kansas, for example. And here's Dave Magley for Kansas with a fantastic acrobatic shot. Here's Jimmy Black with a good outside shot.
Black's got a shot. Oh, has he got a shot all by himself?
But James Worthy was the clear star for North Carolina back in those days. No defense can stop penetration like this. And then Jordan showed off some penetration of his own. In the end, North Carolina prevailed 74-67. The starting 5 players got most of the time for Dean Smith. Jordan wound up with 31 minutes in his rookie start, going 5 for 10 from the floor with 12 points. As impressive as Jordan was, it was Worthy who got the attention in the game summary. But then again, there was at least a little bit of room for Jordan in the newspapers. Well, and there you have it. So subscribe and stick around. We're going to go through every single Michael Jordan game that I can get my hands on, and we're going to do it both in order and with the proper historical context.